The DG campaign to all the PDP candidates in Enugu State. The popular engagement so far. The founder of the Creative Foundation of Partnership. That is the first time you are highly welcome. You are the MPA chairman of Scambos. Good luck.
Thank you very much and welcome. Let me welcome the President of the House, Enugu State. Welcome to the church and the
It is indeed my honor and privilege to stand before you here today to present our statement of purpose, our manifesto. We are standing at a threshold of history today. Enugu has always played a very significant role in the historical trajectory of Nigeria. Our people, Ndi Enugu, are conscious of their place in history. In the last 100 years, Enugu played a host as an administrative headquarters of the southern and eastern provinces. At the twilight of the colonial rule, Enugu was one of the tripods upon which the newly independent Nigeria was built, alongside Oyo and Kaduna. It is such that no discussion of Nigeria can be complete without copious mentioning of the strides of our forefathers and the toils of our people for the betterment of Nigeria. In the soil of Enugu are buried innumerable potentials for future greatness. Enugu has always been central in the development drives in Nigeria. In the last 23 years, and in particular, 7 years, in the past 7 years, under the administration of His Excellency, Right Honorable Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi, we have reinvented ourselves admirably, in spite of the socio-economic challenges. Enugu has been blessed with uninterrupted quality leadership since 1999. And by the way, this quality leadership is by our great party, the PDP. We are, however, being faced with emerging threats. We are being faced today with an existential threat. Danger is looming in the horizon. We cannot address these threats and danger without redoubling our commitment and modifying our approach to governance. And these threats are enormous. We're faced today with a dwindling economy, with the hyperinflation. We had just read a report that showed that we're spending currently 120% of our revenue to service our debts. In the first quarter of this year, we received 1.6 trillion in revenue and spent 1.9 trillion to service our debts. We have increased insecurity due to unemployment and poverty. We have rising unemployment and poverty. Our national education curriculum, it's outdated. We have worsening global crisis in Ukraine, Russia, and all that. Therefore, in repositioning ourselves to face these new challenges, and as we enter the threshold of history, we must do things radically different. We are committed to selflessly serve our people and harness the human and material resources that we have, and to try as much as we can to insulate our state, our dear Enugu State, from these emerging threats. We are indeed standing at the threshold of history to effectuate an unprecedented socioeconomic shift in Enugu State. We are here today to present to you the content of our social contract. We are going to hang this as an almanac by our bedside, and we're going to make sure that whatever we have promised you here, we live up to it. I therefore request you to join me as I take you through our vision, our mission, our strategy, our core values, in what would be an intense program that would ensure the unprecedented socioeconomic shift that we're talking about. Our mission is simple. We want to have people-focused government that is all focused on the people. And we want to make Enugu State the preferred destination for investment, business, tourism, and living. Our mission is very important to remark, because you're going to notice that appearing in almost all our development programs. Is going to underpin the decision that we make as we go along across all our productivity sectors. We also do have a vision. We envision an Enugu State that would become one of the top 3 states in Nigeria in terms of GDP. What that entails is moving our state economy from the current level of 4.4 billion to 30 billion. We do have strategic objectives Our strategic objectives are clear. We want to be able to ensure that we have peace and security in Enugu. We want to have an inclusive economic development. And we also want to have sustainable prosperity. But before I get into that detail, I'd like to take you through our core values. These core values are essentially what underpins our governance principles. You have continuity. We are going to take ownership of the projects that have been started by this administration. Contracts that have been entered into, because we believe that government is a continuum. So whatever projects or contracts that this administration has entered into or executing, we're going to take over that at handover, and we're going to ensure the completion for the benefit of Ndi Enugu. Transparency, traceability, and accountability. This is also a core value if we must achieve our envisioned state of economy, and if we must de-risk investment flow into the state. We must show transparency, we must be accountable. Our plan is to have a codified citizens charter. We're going to publish a codified citizens charter. That citizen charter would spell out our commitment in fiscal management and public financial management. There would be an electronic dashboard where the citizens would have access to information of what the government is doing, the receipts, the monies we're receiving as a government, and how we're spending that money in the interest of Ndi Enugu. There's going to be a participatory monitoring and evaluation. We refer to it as participatory because we also want to include the non-governmental institutions in our budget evaluation and monitoring committee. So we're going to have both the public servants and the non-governmental institution as part of the committee that would evaluate and monitor our budgets. Collaboration. We are going to collaborate with multilateral institutions, DFIs, and I'm sure that part of what most of you would be interested in knowing how we're going to achieve this exponential growth of moving our economy to 30 billion. It would be through collaborating with private sector investors, the global and the local private sector investors. We're going to work closely with them. So I talked about our strategic objectives, and that largely is going to underscore what we're going to hear today. Our strategic objectives are triangulated. They are reinforcing and mutually integrated. So we look at the issue of peace and security. We believe that you cannot have sustainable development without peace. And you cannot also have peace without sustainable development. So they are integrated and mutually reinforcing. The second item on our strategic objective is inclusive economic development. Inclusive because it is possible that we could achieve our objective in growing our economy to $30 billion, and yet the vulnerable ones in our communities would still be hungry. So our development plan would be inclusive. we're going to ensure inclusive governance structure for all the citizens in Enugu. We also have the third item in our triangulation as the sustainable prosperity. Our program for peace and security will see us doing three things. So we're going to have three-pronged interventions in the peace and security programs. Firstly is that we're going to have an integrated program to accelerate youth employment. And I will explain that. We believe that the root causes of insecurity in our communities, and indeed everywhere, are largely unemployment and poverty. And if we must address the soft part of these insecurity challenges, then we must deal with our teeming youth that are unemployed. We must have programs that are targeted to ensuring that our youths we transform them into productive assets rather than the docile asset that they are today. We're also going to have, still under the peace and security, we're going to have an integrated rural development programs. Integrated because these programs will see us playing in a number of sectors. The roads, the rural infrastructure, the water, the ICT infrastructure, and then, of course, we're also going to ensure that we strengthen our education institutions. But still under the peace and security objective, we are also going to do the hardwares, which essentially means that we're going to procure equipment. We're going to empower our community-based organizations, our traditional rulers, our presidents of the various town unions. We're going to ensure that we strengthen our community policing infrastructure. Now going to the inclusive economic development. We're going to develop a systems thing because we're going to be intervening in multiple productivity sectors. So we're going to have a sector-based productivity growth. So we would have a lot of programs. We've identified several sectors that we're going to intervene to enhance our productivity. So the agriculture sector is number one item there. However, if you notice, we no longer refer to it as agriculture. We talk about agriculture and we make reference to agro-allied industrialization. And in order for us to achieve the growth level we are talking about, we can only do that through launching a quantum leap, through disruptive innovation, and through leapfrogging. We cannot grow our economy sevenfold in the next 8 years if all we did was a marginal growth or an incremental growth strategy. That won't take us to the level of growth we're talking about. So we're going to do radical things. So in the agriculture sector, our target and objective in that sector would be to grow that sector using technology. So we have different programs. We have the SAPZ, that's the Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zones. This is zones that we're going to establish, that would be established across the 3 senatorial zones. This will be a zone, a processing zone that is going to help with not just selling our agricultural products raw, but we're going to have them processed, we're going to certify them, we're going to package them, and there would be a whole lot of value chain activities along our SAPZs. TASTE is technology for agricultural system transformation in Enugu. Again, this is, what we have done in our agriculture sector has largely been manual and pipeline. So we're going to move from the manual and pipeline approach to platform. So we're going to do a lot using platform. And platforms, as you know, are increasingly gaining traction across all the sectors of our lives. So we're also going to deploy that in our agriculture sector. We're going to have a platform that allows farmers access to the machineries that they need to work. So just like you do not need to own your own car in order to access a ride with Uber. So we're going to have such system in our agriculture sector. A platform system where just by the use of your mobile device, you can call for a tractor, you can call for the necessary machineries you need to enhance your cultivation. We're going to also ensure what that also does, by implication, is to also make our farmers ICT literate, because we're going to create that awareness and we're going to encourage them to use those platforms. In terms of the frictions we also currently have with attracting investors, the friction you have with investors going to communities to acquire land and all that, our plan is to work with the State House of Assembly to ensure a harmonization of the land tenure in our various communities so that the state can take ownership of this land, parcellate them, and then allocate them to prospective investors, and then making also the communities part owners of that business. So our objective here would be to, as much as possible, de-risk investment, because a lot of what we're going to do in this agri sector would be through also attracting private sector. We have the e-wallet. Again, this is already in use. We're just going to encourage that to happen here. This is also another platform method that allows you to monitor the distribution of seeds and fertilizers. Government is going to provide subsidy for these items, but the major challenge is tracking them, making sure that they get to the actual users, those who are in need of this product. So we're going to also use technology here to ensure that. So we're going to now move to another productivity sector. Before we talk about the energy and the mineral resources sector, it's important to understand that agriculture is an important part in our growth plan, because today agriculture contributes 40% to our GDP, which is about $2 billion. Our target is to move the agri contribution from that rate to $10 billion. That's fivefold, right? And all that we have outlined is going to enable us achieve that. Our objective in the energy and mineral resources, this is a new sector, and our objective here is to make Enugu an oil-bearing and producing state 1 year into our administration. We're going to work with the investors that are currently producing from OPL 916. We're going to engage them to make sure that Enugu, those wells that are also sitting in Enugu, are also being exploited and explored as well. We are in the mineral resources. We do have, we're blessed as a country, as a state, with huge mineral resources. Enugu has alum, we have gypsum, we have clay minerals, we have ironstone, we have glass sand, we have limestone. We do not know the exact quantum or quantity of these resources that we hold underground. So part of what we're going to do is to conduct a geospatial mapping, which is a survey that enables us to ascertain the quantum of these resources we hold underground. As you know, there are also gas fields that we have. Indeed, we have 3 gas fields in Enugu that has not yet been exploited nor explored. So we're also going to engage in making sure we do have data on this gas field. As Enugu is that state where residents, by accident, when they dig their well or borehole, they rupture gas field and you see gas coming out. So that just underscores the sort of gas assets that were sitting on top here in Enugu State. Our job is going to be to harness these resources to grow our GDP. Our objective in this sector would be to attract private sectors. You notice that a lot of what we're going to be doing across our productivity sectors would be enhanced by making the environment attractive for private sector. In the commerce and industry sector, again, this is one sector that is dear and personal to me, knowing that I'm coming from the business background. I know the pains sometimes investors have to endure in obtaining or dealing with regulators and with government authorities. So my job would be to make sure that we create the ease of doing business in this in our commerce and industry sector. So all the 4 layers of the ease of doing business, the ease of setting up your business, obtaining your construction permit, obtaining your title document, and indeed enforcing contracts. We're going to ensure that these things happen. Also, under the commerce and industry, we're going to create special economic zones. Again, industrial park, if you will. But this would be, captive industries it would be a location where our small, medium, and even large-scale industries can operate with all the facilities in place, electricity, water, all the basic infrastructure that they need to operate. We also do have some programs in the commerce and industry sector for our young people. And this would be the innovation incubators. So we do know that our young people in Enugu have done so well in the area of ICT. And our job is to encourage them to be able to explore their full potential. So we're going to have an innovation incubator where we're going to provide all the basic facilities that they need to thrive. We're going to have a fast internet asset. They're going to have a broad and high-speed internet access in this location. They're also going to have the infrastructure that would warehouse the workstations, all the basic tools that they need to explore their full potential will be provided by government. And we're going to encourage them to explore their full potential. The next sector we want to talk about under our productivity sector is the creative industry. Under the creative industry, you know that Enugu State has played a leading role in the past, where for our movie productions and all that, this has been the home for a lot of our Nollywood artists, where they come to produce their movies and all that. But in recent time, that is being taken over by other states. We're going to aggressively pursue that to ensure that we get them back to Enugu. And our hope is that we're going to build a movie academy. We're going to have a summit where we can engage with this industry people, the Nollywood industry, and also the private investors who would be interested in investing in that sector as well. We're going to also have the Enugu fashion and cosmetic cities. The product of our manifesto was born out of deep and robust research of the things that we need here to radically grow our economy. And as you know, they are all detailed in these documents that we're going to be distributing to all of you here today. And it would also be posted on our website. But we have intensive programs under each of our productivity sector that are all designed to boost our envisioned economic growth and the inclusive economic plan that we have by making sure that we achieve our 0% poverty headcount rate. So there will be a lot of interventions that you're going to come across when you go through these documents. The information, communication, and technology sector. Again, everything that we've talked about, as you may have noticed, is a systems thing. You have, in order for us to succeed in agriculture, there are things that we must put in place. We must have a special agro-industrial processing zone. That zone is going to be sited in our various senatorial zones. That means that for us to get there, we must do the roads. We must have the link roads to those locations. We must also have ICT infrastructure. So in ICT, we must ensure that we build the backbone that allows us to provide ICT across all these sectors we're talking about. So part of what we want to do in our ICT infrastructure is to build a data center in Enugu State. By the way, that will be the first data center in the entire Southeast and South-South. It's going to be a Tier 4 hyperscale, cloud-neutral data center. Okay? So our plan is perhaps to invest about working with some private sector, which we have started engaging. Because what having a Tier 4 hyperscale data center does is that you're then able to attract the likes of Google, the likes of Facebook, the likes of Microsoft to have their offices here. I mean, our hope is that once we have a data center that is of Tier 4 hyperscale, we're able to attract an economic activity of over $10 billion. And I'll tell you, we do not need more than $100 million to build a hyperscale Tier 4 data center. But just think about it. With $100 million, we're able in the next 2 to 3 years to to attract economic activities of over $10 billion. So, and indeed, in making this business work, you're not looking at Enugu as just your market. You're also looking beyond the region. You're looking, your market size extends to the south-south, because this is only going to, outside Lagos, this would be the next data center you have. And so we must do this so that we can attract these big names and also engage, get all these platform strategy we've just talked about, using platform rather than pipeline to enable or enhance your productivity in the various sectors. They can only happen when you have built a functional data center. That's a strong backbone you have for both your internet connectivity and storage of your data. We also would be doing an infusion, internet or ICT penetration across our various academic institutions, from primary school, secondary school to the university. We're going to ensure that we expose our young ones to the ICT skills. Another skill acquisition that is very relevant for our young people is the sort of skills that you can use today. As I mentioned earlier, market is migrating from pipeline, from brick and mortar to platforms. So what that means is that you want to have your young ones acquire skills in fintech, digital finance, e-commerce, okay? You want them to acquire skill in cybersecurity and all that. So we're going to be interested in those areas to ensure that we equip our young ones to deal with this future greatness that is our dream. Land, in our productivity sector, we had the urban and rural infrastructure. So we have under it land and housing. This current government has done tremendously well in the area of land and housing. If you look at our city, you notice that you have new estates that are springing up. So there is a boom in this sector. But part of what we're going to do is to continue to encourage, of course, investors in this area. But above all, we're going to deviate a bit to also get interested in mass housing, where we can get also the mainstream segment, the economy segment of our society incorporated, because of course shelter is an important, it's one basic, need that we have as human beings. So we are going to encourage investment in mass housing and also work with those in the mainstream segment of our economy, work with them to have a mortgage system that allows them to own these homes. We're also going to be interested in working corporately with private sector investors to build a mega city. Because I'm sure that those of us who have to do our school runs and move from our homes to office every day are becoming increasingly frustrated with the gridlocks that we're experiencing in Enugu. We don't want it to get to the level of Lagos before we do something about it. So we're going to start now. We're going to start now to avoid the implosion that we may see in that sector if we do not take urgent steps. So part of our plan will be to work with the private sector and build a mega city so we can diffuse the concentration of residents in Enugu. And then, of course, so that you can also breathe. The roads and bridges. Again, we've seen just recently the completion of the bridge, the flyover at the Nike Lake intersection. Our job here also would be to do some very ambitious things here. Again, coming back to disruptive innovation. We've set a huge target for ourselves here. Our target here is to do about 10,000 kilometers of roads. We want to build a ring road across all our local governments. We also want to ensure that you can move to the various agri-business centers. Don't forget that agriculture for us is now migrating from being a consumption smoothing to a serious business. So, and for us to be successful in that regard, we must have access roads to these various farmlands. And we're going to create that, working with the private sector investors who would be interested in investing in these various parcellations that we're going to create. Again, you recall that we had talked about our land tenure system, how we intend to harmonize that working with the State House of Assembly. We are going to ensure that when these investors come to invest, they would also be interested in working with us in building these access roads. You know, it's good for them, it's good for us, but we're going to have targeted policy incentives that would make these investments bankable. Again, the good thing we have going for us is our background, because we know how to make investments bankable. We know how to risk the challenges investors are likely to have. We understand their pains, we understand their language. So if we have to de-risk the commerciality, we know how to do that. If we have to de-risk the construction risk, we also know how to do that. If we have to help them de-risk the finance risk, we also know how to do that. So we're going to work closely with these investors. So when you hear 10,000 kilometers of road, it is not a figure that was plucked from the blue. It is some figure that was carefully thought through. So we understand what the cost implication of that is, and we're committing, we're presenting these documents to you, pledging to commit selflessly to full execution of the items we have here. In public transportation, our plan there is also radical, as always. We're going to have a multimodal system of transportation. We're going to reduce the concentration we have on our roads. And again, when we, as you will soon see, when we get to the tourism sector, you would notice that our plan is to attract over 3 million people to our state. What that means is that we must have a multimodal system. Otherwise, it would almost be impossible to move people from point A to point B. So we're going to develop light rails, trams in our city. And we're going to, where required, we're going to dualize our road, expand it, make sure that we're also going to have an inland waterway transportation system. Already, we have, unbeknown to a lot of people, Enugu State is not a landlocked state. Enugu has a coastal land, and we're going to explore that. We're going to have an inland waterway system. We have already started working with our members who are in the House of Representatives. We're fortunate, by the way, to have one of our sons as the chairman of the House Committee of Inland Waterway. And I must also state here that through his instrumentality, we've been able to get the inland waterway to conduct a bathymetry survey. So we know that that waterway is navigable, we can actually transport and move our goods and persons from that location to different other locations, to Onitsha, to Kogi, using the inland waterway. So we have that data now. We have the bathymetric survey. All we need to do is to understudy what sort of barges we need to be able to use for the inland waterway system. Urban renewal. I'm sure we all feel excited when we walk around the streets in the West. We see that we have the pedestrian track, we have the cyclist track, and then of course we have the drainages covered. That is what we're going to do in Enugu State. We are going to have our streets and our city of world-class standard. We're going to have street lights, we're going to have traffic lights, we're going to have the cyclist lane, the pedestrian lane, our drainages would all be covered. We would have, our streets will be regreened. We're going to have it regreened, plant tree where we need to plant tree. It is going to be a beauty to behold. Those lifestyles, those amenities that we are used to when we travel outside this country, that will bring them back to our city and don't have to miss them because we're in our home country. There is no reason we cannot do it. The tourism sector. This is again another sector that is so dear to us. So dear to us. Because Enugu, as we said, has played significant role in the historical trajectory of Nigeria. We have that rich history. And people across the world want to come and see why Enugu, why Enugu. It is not by accident that the colonial masters chose Enugu as their administrative headquarters in the 20s. It is not by accident that it was from this great city, this great soil, that we had to produce what was used to power the industries in Europe and in the United Kingdom. So our job is essentially to revive that future greatness. And that tomorrow is here. Our objective in the tourism industry will be to build a world-class theme park in Enugu State. So what we want to do is to mimic what you already have in Walt Disney and in Euro Disney. So we want to have the Afro Disney here in Enugu State. Our topography lends itself to it. We have the right topography. We have sceneries that are beauty to behold. So we must take advantage of all that. The rolling hills of Nsukka and the rolling hills of Udi cannot just go for waste. Okay. We must put them into, transform them into productive assets, make money from them. So what we want to do is going to see us attracting, at the first instances, about 3 million visitors every year. And again, what that also means is, if you're going to move 3 million people here, you must also be sure that your international airport is working. And how lucky can a people be? We're lucky again that we have one of our sons who is heading the House Committee on Aviation. So we have also engaged him. And we're talking closely with him, so he's working tirelessly to ensure that Enugu international airport wing becomes operational. And it is our hope that that would happen sooner than later, because that would be part of that enabler to be the key driver for investors who are interested, because then it's easy for people to travel straight from their countries of residence to Enugu if they don't have to do a lot of stops. So we're working closely to make sure that that happens. We also still on the tourism sector. There are also a number of historic sites that we have. The Ohum waterfall, the Akuke caves. That's also, and of course we do have the Unity Park that has been completed by this current administration. Those of you who have been there know that it's a beauty to behold. It's a place to go, and again, a tourist attraction site. For the places we've just mentioned, the Ohum waterfall, it is also what, if we're thinking in this line, then it must mean that the access to those locations too must be what? Must be done. So we have good roads to those locations, and we design it in such a way that we generate revenue from it as a government. You notice that what we have just done is to look at the productivity sectors. But there are, of course, the fact that we had to talk about those productivity sectors first does not mean that we're not, or we are giving less attention to our social services sector, because we're going to come to the social services. It is important for you to know that the social services are as important to us as the productivity sector, because you cannot be productive if you're not healthy, right? You can't have a productive economy if your citizens do not have good health. So the social services sectors are as important to us. But because we have promised to build our economy to 30 billion, we wanted to first show you the different sectors that would help generate those economic activities. But they are not more important than our social services sectors. The health care sector. Our objective here is to have universal coverage, to make sure that every citizen, everybody living in Enugu have access to medical care. And we have the legal framework for that already. We have the National Health Insurance Scheme Act, which makes it largely mandatory for you to have universal coverage, health care coverage. We also have some law in the state, which is the Enugu State Agency for Universal Health Law, Health Coverage Law. That again is one law that makes it mandatory for you to obtain a health insurance coverage. That coverage allows you to have health care across, the whole year with just 12,000 naira. With just 12,000 naira, you're able to be fully covered. And I'm not sure that our people are aware that this exists. Because if you think about how much you spend to send to your loved ones when they are sick, and if you realize that you can actually pay for 10 people 120,000, and for the whole year, they don't need to call you again for any health issues because they now have access to health care. So with just 12,000 naira, that is a lead that our government must follow. We must encourage that, we must create awareness, ask our people to adopt as much as they can, and also encourage those of our people living in the diaspora to get their people covered. This is already there. We must take advantage of it. Our intervention in healthcare, again, another area that is of key importance to us is the access to primary health. So we're going to have critical intervention, two-pronged intervention in the primary health care. First of all is to make sure that we equip our buildings, and the second is to make sure that they are well staffed and that we have staff there on a 24/7 basis. Because our vulnerable ones are our pregnant women, and maternal, these are the primary health assets that they have. So we must make sure that they have people there to attend to them on a 24/7. So our primary health care, beyond just fixing them, equipping them, we must also staff them to ensure that at any time of the day, someone we see can go and be attended to, whether in our rural communities or the urban communities. We, of course, going to replicate the same thing in our secondary health care, make sure that it's well staffed and also well equipped. In the tertiary health care, our plan there is to build specialist hospital across the 3 zones, right? Because we are also interested in making Enugu State a medical tourist hub in West Africa. We're going to be doing that. The current government, as you know, has just completed the State University of Medicine and Applied Sciences at Ibadan. Our government would ensure also that we add a trauma center in our state, as we prefer to call it, SUMAS. We're going to ensure that we add a trauma center there, ensure that that place is well equipped to deal with all our trauma challenges and all that. So these are leads that we must follow. And this current government has done greatly in the area of healthcare. They have renovated a lot of our healthcare facilities across the state. And these are leads that we would continue to follow and build on. We do have some ambitious programs in our education sector. We recognize the fact that in order for us to eradicate poverty, part of the long-term plans we have is education. So we're going to have a program that is known as cutoff. Cutoff essentially speaks to having a cutoff point. We are going to identify our 4-year-old, catch them at that age 4. Make sure we pour everything we have into them, the right civic habits, the right moral values, and modern curriculum to equip them to deal with the reality of today. And our hope is that 15 to 20 years from now, these 4-year-olds are going to be these future leaders that we're talking about. And they would have all been equipped not only to deal with the civil and moral values that we just talked about, but also their academic, the learning that they have would be relevant to the times that we're talking about. So we're going to have a lot of ICT infusion right from our primary education, our early child education. This is extremely important to us because we believe that if we're able to catch them young and pour the right values into them, we'll be able to curb a lot of challenges that we'll deal with in the future. We also have a program to make it mandatory, working with, again, the State House of Assembly. We want to make a law that would make it mandatory for every 18-year-old in Enugu State to have a vocational skill. So that would mean that we're going to review our curriculum. So at age 12, they are going to begin to, in addition to their formal academic learning, they go ahead and be doing that. They would also have a vocation and technical skill that they are going to be learning, whether it's carpentry, plumbing, electrician, tiling, whatever it is. But at a certain age, they will then have to decide, I want to pursue the formal academic channel, or no, maybe my calling, it's in the technical and vocational learning, and then you build on that. So we're going to ensure that that happens in our education sector. We also have the STEM. The STEM is the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Our hope is to have this comprehensive science education across the 3 senatorial zones. So we're going to have each STEM education center in the various senatorial zones. So for our talented young ones, those who want to build themselves in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, we will be able to get them access to our STEM learning centers. You notice that we have put water under social services because we believe that it is our responsibility as a government to make sure that we make water available to our citizens. And there are challenges, no doubt, in the provision of water. But we also have understudied those challenges. We understand the different hurdles that we're currently having with water supply to our state. They stem from, some of them are from the midstream and the downstream. As you know, we have enough supply in terms of our resource. We do have enough supply to meet the consumption level of Enugu. However, the M&E, the mechanical and electrical components of the midstream section of our water supply is challenged, and we're going to address those ones, making sure that we have power supply to where you have these pumps, and also making sure that the valves, the pipelines are all up to date and they are all working effectively, something we're going to do. And if we come to the downstream, some of the pipes that we have actually lived out their design life. So we do need to take bold approach, get some of those pipes replaced, because maybe repairing them will not just help us, because they are, these things have their design life. And once they've lived up their design life, what you need to do is do what? Replace them. So we're going to deal with the downstream, which essentially involves reticulations, making sure that we address that. But talking about enabling environments and making Enugu a preferred destination, we cannot possibly achieve that without water supply. Because businesses that want to come and establish in Enugu, they don't want of other costs that a businessman should worry about. He doesn't want to add the cost of looking for how he gets his water. So to direct that also, we have to provide water. So we're going to work very hard to make sure that we provide water to the various households in the urban area, but above all, in our rural areas as well. Because if we're talking about, and very soon, when we get to our environmental management and sanitation, we're going to notice that we're concerned about open defecation. And if we have to address that, we must make sure that there is access to water in our rural area. So we're going to work to make sure that nobody living in the rural area is more than 5 minutes walk from water supply. It's a challenge, no doubt, but we're going to crack it. We have the commitment. We have the character to ensure that we get this solved. We know how challenged our people are, making sure that they turn on their tap and just have water run from that tap. So we're with you in that pain. We're going to make sure that we fix it. Environmental management and sanitation. We already talked about some of the things we want to do in environmental management and sanitation, where, again, we want to, as much as possible, regreen our environment, plant trees, and make sure that we stem the tide of deforestation. These practices of cutting down trees in our various communities is a challenge. We all know what the environmental challenges pose for us as a country. We're witness to the sort of flood that is happening in other states of the Federation. We're not insulated from it. If we don't protect our environment, it may be us the next time. So this whole thing with climate change, carbon emission, and all that, it's something that we have to watch. And our best strategy is to reduce these practice of deforestation, keep planting as many trees as we can. Then also, under environmental management, we're also going to be, encourage our people who mine sands from, the challenges and the difficulties inherent in some of those practices, so that we can stem the tide of erosion in our various communities. In sanitation, we are also going to introduce programs that would see us managing. So it's going to be a waste to wealth program. So the collection of our refuse and the dump sites and all that would also, again, we talk about platforms, we talk about technology. Our environmental management sector is another sector that is going to enjoy platform technology. We're going to make sure that we use platform. There are a lot of radical things that we are going to do. And some of them, they've worked elsewhere, they've tried them. Some are just things that we conceive and we believe that we have to modify to work in our environment. So, but the issues of refuse removal, refuse dump, and all that, and how we move our waste and create wealth with it, is all going to be, they've received serious attention in this document. And also the practice of making sure that in our various rural communities that we curb completely the incidents of open defecation, because we know what happens with that. It also impacts on our healthcare sector. So that's one area that we're working very hard on, and we're going to make sure that we deal with. In the youth and the sports and youth development, again, our objective here is going to be beyond the recreational part of sports. We also want to use sports to generate revenue. So sports will not just be recreational, but it would also be a major revenue booster for us, because we hope to build, of course, you know that Enugu has played host to a lot of sports legends in the different sports, football, tennis, what have you. We remember with fond memories the likes of Christian Chukwu, JJ Okocha, and they are all homeboys. They are all Enugu bred. So we're going to continue to encourage that by building sport academies where we can have these various, catch our young people, send them to these academies, equip them, working with private sector. As I said, this is going to be a major revenue booster for us. So we're going to encourage a lot of private sector participation in our youth and sports development. Now we're moving into another section. You recall that from the onset, we talked about the triangulation of our strategic objectives. We talked about the peace and security initiatives. We talked about the inclusive economic development. And the third item there was the sustainable prosperity. And under the sustainable prosperity, we must ensure that we strengthen our institutions that would, because again, these institutions are also key drivers for most of what we have talked about here today. If people don't get justice when a contract is breached, then they are not likely to come to your state to invest because they will be worried that they cannot get justice or it's going to delay. So our job is also to strengthen the capacity of our judiciary, working with the chief judge, the State House of Assembly, to see how we can set up specialist courts. So we have commercial courts, family courts, and then maybe real estate courts, like you have in other jurisdictions, so that we can fast track some of these matters. We also hope to digitize our case management system and even our court proceedings and the administrative part of our judiciary functions. We hope to automate them and put them in digital form. That way we can dispense justice expeditiously. We are also looking at the judiciary. We're going to set up, of course, industrial courts, and of course, we talked about the magistrate also is another important arm of the judiciary that we look at, because a lot of people who have tenancy matters go there to seek redress. So we need to ensure that we enhance our capacity in the magistracy and make sure that justice is also dispensed expeditiously there. This is public service, and these are the main anchors of everything we have talked about here today. So we must empower them. And if we're going to use technology to enhance our productivity growth, then it means that our civil servants, the operator of this various sector, must also be technologically compliant. So they must be trained. So our job is going to make sure that we train and retrain our civil servants so that they are all equipped. So human capital, capacity building will be what we're going to focus so much. And we're going to deploy e-governance practice across all the various layers. So we're going to have e-governance to citizens, e-governance to employees, e-governance to business, e-governance to government. So across those 4 layers, we must begin to practice e-governance. And again, and when we talk about the models, our finance model, you notice that this is going to save us huge costs. Running smart government is going to cut down our cost of running government, increase, and also make sure that we capture some of the leakages, plug the leakages we have in our revenue generation with e-governance. So we're going to work extremely hard to encourage and train our civil servants to be equipped with these skills, to take government to the citizens rather than wait for the citizens to come. We can basically get all the services we want from government from our smartphone, right? Instead of going to the ministries. You can sit down, if we structure this well, we can sit down and receive most of these services just using our smartphone. Again, I'm sure one of the things that must be troubling you, because it also troubled me a lot, is where are you going to find money to do all these things you're talking about? Yeah, I could almost Yes, but frankly, it gave us, it's not just about finance. There are also other considerations. There is also that part of capacity. There is also that part of competence. And there is also that part of character. Okay? So they are all integrated. So for you to attract the finance, the funds that you need to implement some of the things we just mentioned, you are going to have those 3 C's that I had just mentioned. You're going to have capacity, you're going to have competence, and you're going to have character. Okay, you must have them. And we've thought, we've come up with a number of financing models. The first one is to boost our internally generated revenue. And our strategy in this area is not by increasing our tax rate. We already know the pains our people are going through this time around with the harsh economic environment that we're faced with. So we would not want to burden them further by increasing the tax rates. However, what we hope to do there in this area, in our IGR, is to expand our tax net to ensure that we spread our net wider and bring in more people into our tax net. We also hope to do a lot of innovative partnership, co-financing, syndication. So what that means is we're going to work with private sectors in a number of projects where we have to do PPP, which is the private-public partnership. So private-public sector partnership would mean that some of the investments may not be attractive to private sectors, for the private sector, if the government does not de-risk some portion of it. So because a lot of what we have talked about here today is going to be enabled by the government, but driven by private sector. So there has to be that collaboration and syndication in a number of the projects that we want to do. Part of what we want to do, 100 days to our administration, is to have an investors summit. Now, that investment summit rather, is going to attract investors from both the public global investors and the private investors also locally. We know that that would be an opportunity, that would afford us a great opportunity to market Enugu State to these investors and to explain to them how we are able to de-risk investment flow to our state. Because we understand the pains, we understand challenges that businesses have. We're going to use those skills we have to work for our state, because we've done it. When we started Pinnacle about 14 years ago, we started it in a 1-bedroom apartment. From day one, we said to our colleagues in the same industry, from day one, if anybody saw the Pinnacle letterhead in 2008, it says we're going to play, that was our vision, we're going to play a dominant role in the downstream sector of the oil and gas industry. That was what we said from day one. We had nothing, had only 3 employees. We also then said, another thing which is our tagline in Pinnacle is driven by innovation, sustained by people. driven by innovation, sustained by people. So, which made it easy when we came into the industry and we had a lot of people doing one thing. It was almost like a bandwagon effect. You have to go to Apapa and build a tank farm. You have to go to Mbah and build it. It was what was in vogue. We could have also done the same thing. We would have gone to Apapa and built our tank farm. But we saw that there was huge inefficiency in that process. You were having a lot of multiple handlings. You bring in cargo, you keep it in the high sea, and then you go with a shuttle vessel to lighter her. You're incurring cost on the shuttle vessel, you're paying the demurrage on the mother vessel. And we said that it wasn't sustainable. So what we did was to disrupt that sector, to disrupt those inefficiencies, and do what? Destroyed those multiple handling, built an open intake facility where those mother vessels could discharge directly to the terminal without the multiple handling. So it's indeed possible. It's indeed possible that we would do the same thing in Enugu State. We have the character also beyond the competence. You cannot play in any space at such a large scale if you don't have integrity. The banks will not give you money. The banks will not lend you a dime if they know you're a thief, if they know you're dishonest. It's as simple as that. If you're not credible, you cannot access funds from the bank. So you must be credible to be able to deal at such a high scale. Okay? So we did that because we have the competence and the character. And we're going to deploy that, everything the experience we've been through in the private sector, we've acquired. We're going to bring all that to bear in our dear state, Enugu. And we're going to transform the economy of our state to be like that of Lagos. With a $30 billion economy, we are just about the size of Lagos' economy. Right? And it's not impossible. That is the size of many countries' economy in Africa. That's what we're going to do here in Enugu State. It's doable if we have the can-do spirit. And we do have it because our historic past lends itself to that. So we are also in our financing models. We also hope to have what is known as Diaspora Investment Bond. Diaspora Investment Bond. As you know, there is a huge decline of FDIs and ODAs. So the foreign direct investments and the overseas development assistance are increasingly, we don't see them anymore. So we need to think creatively. What's the alternative? How do we attract investments if these FDIs are not flowing and the ODAs are no longer coming? So we're thinking about setting up investment bond that will be attractive to our diasporans. This is not a novel thing, by the way. It started in the 30s by, I think the first country that did it was either Israel or China, and then followed by Japan and subsequently India. Okay, so this diaspora investment fund has happened elsewhere. So we just want to do exactly the same thing in Enugu, where the funds that are remitted to Enugu by our diasporans will not just be for consumption. We can also set up an investment bond that is, provide some securitization around it, make it tradable. We have a whole lot of plans that you would discover we've put in place here to be able to attract funds. But above all is making sure that we have that constant investment flow to our state. I want to say this, that the future of Enugu State is in our hands. If we fail, posterity would never forgive us. This is not time for politics. We cannot politicize our future, or indeed the future of our children. We must come together to collectively forge that future where Enugu State will be the destination for greatness. Therefore, plead with you, urge you to join me in this our journey of growth, this our journey of greatness, this our journey of development. Please support me with your vote in the 2023 governorship election as the PDP candidate. Thank you very much. Thank you.